Previously, we've discussed the definition of marketing, and you'll remember from that discussion that one of the key concepts and components of the definition is this idea of value for customers and of course the organisation and other members. What we want to delve into now is much more deeply into our understanding of this concept of value, particularly for customers. So what you'll see from this definition of value is that we're talking about a trade-off, a difference between the benefits people get relative to the costs that they give up. Now, we think that in most instances people buy the product or service, whatever it might be, that they perceive gives them the most value. That's why we choose one thing over another. Now, you might think about situations when you're purchasing when that doesn't happen, but if we actually look at all of these components and these different types of benefits that we give or the different costs that we might give up, you can see that we do make these trade-offs whenever we're purchasing something. The model that we're going to use to understand value is one by Smith and Colgate, and you have these readings and you really do need to read this article. It's going to underpin everything that we do in this unit and these lessons. So we're going to look at customer value. The first three blue boxes refer to benefits and categories of benefits. The fourth green box refers to costs, the things that we give up. So there's three categories of benefits that we might experience and one grouping of costs. Now, in any given situation, we're not going to get all of these benefits, and equally, we're not necessarily going to incur all of these costs. But it's the combination of these and the trade-off that ultimately gives us value. So let's now look at the first of these types of benefits in more detail, and we're going to look at functional or instrumental value. Again, we can divide functional instrumental value up into three different areas, but this is really probably the element of a product that we're most familiar with. This is the idea is that we are purchasing a product to do something. We want it to do something for it. For us, we want it to work as the product is meant to work. We want the car to get us somewhere. And that's what we're focusing on with this kind of value. It's very tangible, it's fairly obvious what it is. Now, of course, the things that we're looking for is, does the product have the correct attributes? Does the car have the elements that we need? Does it contain all the bits that we want? And of course, we can make choices about products and how many attributes they have. Do we just want the most simple model of the product, or do we want one that has lots of different elements to it? And we can choose those, and different people will want different quantities of these attributes and different amounts of them. The other type of value we've got here is, does it perform appropriately? So does it do what we need it to do? It might have all of the components, but maybe they don't always work. Maybe they don't work in the way we expected them to, or in the way that we wanted it to. So again, it has to have everything we want, but it also has to perform and deliver what we want it to deliver. And by performing in that way, we actually get the outcomes that we want from the product as well. The car gets us to where we want to go. The university degree that we choose gets us the job that we want. So these are the types of things that we're looking at when we're looking at functional and instrumental value. Does it do what it's meant to do? The next type of value that we can think about is experiential or hedonic value. Now, this one's a little bit more interesting and a little bit more removed from what the product might look like when we first see it. The first element of this hedonic or experiential value is sensory. So this is that we get benefit from the product feeling nice or looking nice, being aesthetically pleasing, smelling nice. So different things might clean your teeth equally from a functional perspective, but some toothpastes taste better or smell better, and we are willing to pay more for them because of this extra benefit. Other types of value we get here is, for example, emotional value. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel happy. It gives me an additional source of pleasure above its functional sense, but in an emotional way. So if we look at social and relational, this gives us benefit in terms of our interactions with other people. So by consuming this product, it helps us get on with other people, it helps us form part of groups, people look at us favourably, it might be a matter of taking a present to a party and those kinds of things. And we get benefit from that social interaction that incurs as part of doing this. Possibly a really good example of this is thinking about playing a team sport. You get value from being part of that team. Now the final one, epistemic. practice saying that word. This one is about knowledge. So potentially your university education gives you this epistemic value. You do it because you just want to learn, because you're fascinated about learning about marketing and value. We can get knowledge. We read books because we want epistemic value. We consume movies, these kinds of things. We're expanding our knowledge of things, our interest in things, and that's the kind of value we get from that product. Arguably, something like laundry detergent doesn't have any of this form of value. So now we've covered experiential and hedonic value, and we're going to move on now to the third of our dimensions of value, symbolic and expressive. Symbolic and expressive value is about psychological benefits, things that by consuming the product, psychologically we feel better and benefit in these different areas. Again, I'm going to remind you that not every product has every one of these dimensions or these subdimensions, but these are the different types of benefits that we can get from products. So self-identity, self-worth. Some products make us feel better. This is about how we feel when we get something. It improves our thoughts about ourselves and our feelings about that. So it could be how you dress. For women, this can be things about makeup and hair, or it could be an association with things you do in terms of playing sport. Makes you feel good. Going to the gym makes you feel good about yourself and improves your self-identity and your feelings of self-worth. Other products have personal meanings. So personal meanings often relate to some of our backgrounds. Now, I'm going to talk about that a bit more when I talk about conditional meaning. But this is very individual, very hard for marketers who want to sell you things to understand this. This could be because the product has benefit because someone that you care about gave it to you. So the meaning's not actually necessarily coming out of the product itself, but it could be because of who gave you the product, or that you had it when you were a child and you now have brought it with you on your university venture, something like that. We can also get value because the product allows us to express ourselves. It allows us to tell the world something about who we are. And it's going, look at me, this is who I think I am, and this is what I want you to know about me. And that other people can see that from the product that we're consuming. Products can also have benefit because of social meaning. This is very much about how we want people to think about us. So if we want to belong to a particular group or a particular element of society, or to be perceived in a particular way by other people, we'll buy products that we think have social meaning. So a brand of car might be associated with being successful, and we buy the car because we want to put that forward. And again, this is different from the early ones because this is very much about how we want other people to view us, whereas the first few are all about how we feel about ourselves. Now, the final one of these kind of psychological benefits and sources of value is conditional meaning. And again, similar to personal meaning, this will depend on our culture and on our background. So different products have meaning because of where we grew up, or different colours have meanings and associations because of our backgrounds, of our cultural understandings. And so products will have those meanings attached because of that, and if they're positive, then that is also of value to you. Again, this category of value is very difficult for a marketer to understand because it's so related to each individual. But when you're sitting there perhaps trying to understand why does one person value a product more than someone else, perhaps it can be explained by understanding these symbolic or expressive elements of value that one person perceives in a product, whereas someone else might not. So that concludes talking about the three groups of benefits that we can get in terms of the value equation. Now we're going to have a look at the fourth one, the cost, the sacrifice component of value. So let's think now about cost. And as we can see here, cost has four basic components. Economic is obvious. It's the one that we most easily understand. It's the dollar amount that we pay for a product. It's the money that we hand over, that we give up. It can include things like switching costs and opportunity costs and some more complicated economic concepts like that you might learn in other units. But think of this as the money that we pay. But it's not as straightforward as that. because there's these other elements that cost, that subtract from the benefits that we get. And one of them is psychological. And you'll find as you study marketing, we actually talk about psychology quite a bit. So psychological costs are to do with, as we're approaching purchasing something, as we're thinking about purchasing something, we actually have to think quite hard about that. We might have to search for information about where the product exists. We might have to think about whether we're going to buy it. We might decide whether we really want to switch from the existing product we have to a new one. And all of this takes up psychological energy and psychological effort before we've even got the product and brought it home or consumed it. So we talk about this as being part of the psychological cost. Another one is personal investment, and this seems really similar to psychological, but personal investment is to do with much more the actual purchase itself at the point in time that you get the product. How much time does it take you to make the transaction? How long is the queue in the shop? How much effort do you have to go to? Is it difficult to find a car park? What kind of energy do you have to invest in doing it? Or can you just, for example, simply click on a button on a website and the product gets delivered to you at home? That would have a low investment cost here. Whereas something where you have to drive around, find the car park, find the shop, stand in a queue, argue with someone is all high personal investment, which adds to the cost and reduces our perception of value. The final category is risk, and risk is about whether or not we think something might go wrong and how high that risk is. Some situations we perceive have very low risk, remembering of course that not all of these sacrifices or costs exist in every purchase situation. So risk that it will go wrong, risk that it won't perform the way that we want it to go, risk that any one of the categories of value aren't realised. So there could be the risks, the emotional risks associated with it. It could be functional risks that the product just doesn't work. What are the consequences that might be negative that are associated with purchasing these products? And those four types of costs add up together to give us the total cost. So if we now go back and look at the model as the whole, we can understand that we've got these three potential sources of value with all of those subsections, and any one of those things can contribute to value. And it's important to remember that not all products will have all of these sources of value, and we trade those off against the potential sources of cost and the sacrifice value that we give up, and the difference between those two is the ultimate value that we perceive in the product. And generally what we end up choosing as consumers is the product that to us represents the highest level of value.